Hello and welcome to another episode of Graham Hughes' PUBCAST, and today I'm joined by Professor Thom Brooks of Durham University, Dean of Law and Government.
Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. So let's talk law, let's talk government. So today we're going to touch on a few different subjects. So I don't know if we're going to have one narrative for the whole of the talk, but what I'd like to start with is this week we've seen 20 people put on a plane and sent back where they came from to Jamaica.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting because Rolf Harris, who was a white paedophile from Australia, no one's talking about deporting him back to Australia.
He can stay.
Yeah, and Boris Johnson, who's admitted using Class A drugs, a guy who he tried to get a journalist beaten up, didn't he? There's a recording of it. And
he does have nicer hair than me.
He was born in New York. And
he certainly was.
No one's even considered deporting him.
No.
So is this from a law point of view? Is this one rule for white people, one rule for black people?
Well, that's exactly what was said in Prime Minister's Questions, effectively, by Jeremy Corbyn.
And one of the few good points he's ever made in Prime Minister's Questions. Bit late now, Jeremy, but...
Well, a good point nonetheless. We can at least agree on that.
Yeah.
And I thought a very powerful one, that these are people that were deemed to be such a terrible problem, at least one of whom had only been convicted of a Class A drug use, that they couldn't stay in the country anymore. And if I recall, and I don't know the circumstances of everyone who was put on this plane, but I believe that these are folks who had been convicted, had those who had done their prison time,
so
and that was over.
Served their sentence.
I believe so.
And didn't one of them have dependents, children in the country who are now left without a father? To which Nick Ferrari, that charming man on the radio, said, well, the father should have thought about that before he did the crime. And you're like, yeah, but it's punishing the children. It's taking their parent away and leaving them. Oh, thank you.
There you go.
I just got
This just magically appears.
Glamorous assistance. Thanks.
Very helpful staff on the Graham Hughes podcast program.
Well, they're well paid.
I don't dare say that, but no. So that's absolutely. So the comment from Nick Ferrari is very worrying, not least because it might have been true. I don't know the ages of everyone, but it might have seemed likely that the offence could have happened before there was children on the scene. So it's really shocking stuff. To put the legal spin on all this stuff that you want to get at. So one of the things that's happened over recent years is it was the case that there were people who had been convicted, had gone to prison, and then at the end of their sentence were allowed to stay despite the Home Office wanting to send people back on the grounds of right to family life for the child, that required both parents being here were relevant. And what has happened since is that has been changed. And so provided that there is a parent or guardian that can be here for the child, and you don't need to have both. So provided the child has a mother or guardian or some type of parent, then that is not illegal anymore. So that's one thing. So not quite the fact of having a cat.
Till recently,
as a previous Home Secretary, Home Secretary Theresa May said that someone was denied deportation because they had a cat, and that EU law meant something like this, and that was completely false.
And that's never EU law, by the way. Can we clarify this?
There's two things.
There's EU law, which is under the ECJ, the European Court of Justice, and then there's human rights, which is under the European Court of Human Rights.
Yes.
Even though since we last spoke, we have now officially left the EU.
Wow.
Even though we still have to follow its rules and regulations with no say for the next 9 months?
Graham, some might say that right now Britain is a country of rule takers and not rule makers.
Yeah,
but hey, I was the one who campaigned for that. But
wow. Yeah, we'll come on to that, but let's go back onto this.
Deportations.
So you're saying that up till recently, if that you couldn't be deported if you had a dependent in the country who didn't have another parent, but now you can.
Yes.
So those children are going to be looked after by the state.
I would imagine they're going to be people who are going to be looked after by a parent or guardian, that they'd have some family here, that the only relative would not be the one put on a plane back to Jamaica.
But can they do that?
Well, yes, there's been deportations of people who had been convicted of criminal offenses, and provided their child, has another parent or guardian relative here to look after that child in Britain. Again, it doesn't have to be that the child is necessarily British, but the child has a home here, even if not British. The parent who has the conviction has been sent away. That's happened. Now,
have they changed the rules so that you can be sent away even if that child has no one to look after them?
If the child is that I don't think so. Okay. No. So again, in these cases, I'm not aware of children having no one and being kind of orphaned, as it were, legally or politically. I don't have any knowledge of that. I would have assumed that they were not, and I would have assumed that there is someone to look after them, that these people were. I also assume, this is dog whistle politics, that this was something done to make it look like the state is being very tough on people, when it's not really, that these are folks who I think had already served their time. And also, we can go back, we can do many layers on this. It depends on how many you want. I mean, one, these are people who have been found to have committed in many cases, I think, Class A drug use, something that the Prime Minister does not deny having done
or Michael
himself.
Gove.
Or
a lot of the traits of people who use these drugs, you see them in the front bench of the government.
The
narcissism, the arrogance, the idea that money's no object and you just spend it all on whatever.
And the difference is not, say, the fact that someone has done something. This is not a contested matter. If the police were to say, "Oi, Prime Minister, you're being accused of this," it's not something that he contests. So he has that very much in common with the people who've been deported. The only difference between them is that one group have a criminal record already, and the Prime Minister does not yet have
Well, he should do, because he did lie to the Queen.
Which is very, very naughty.
Be a criminal offence.
Don't do that. Well, I was asked by CNN, or someone at CNN, I think on air, about isn't that like really bad? And don't you go to the tower for that? I don't know. And I was like, well, not anymore, I guess. But that would be really quite wonderful. But one of the things that's fascinating about foreign nationals being deported from only fascinating from a nerdy legal perspective for those of us who get very excited about immigration law, which might be just me.
You wrote a book about it, didn't you?
Indeed I did, and I've got more in me. So how does the state find out about foreign offenders? The answer is they ask the people if they're foreign or not. So the record of who is actually not from here is not through a passport check at Her Majesty's prison. It is by, I'm from somewhere else.
Oh, so basically you're saying that if an unscrupulous lawyer, hypothetically could advise their client, I know you were born in another country, but just don't say anything,
they would not be recorded as foreign in prison.
Oh, wow.
It's self-reported.
Top tip, boys and girls,
self-reported.
If you're ever going to commit a crime and you weren't born in the UK.
So then what's fascinating, I'm not for immigration stuff going further to the right, and I oppose lots of things. But it is an anomaly that people who want to have a driver's license, want to register with a GP, want to rent from private accommodation, but not own and rent out private accommodation.
Oh yes, that's true.
Yes,
you can't rent, but you can own.
But if you want to rent rather than own, in those cases you need to prove you have residency in the UK and you can be here to drive your car, to see the doctor, and so on and so forth. Unless you want to buy somewhere, that's fine. You can do that. You don't have to be have any right to be here. You can buy anything you want. But those cases, you do need to show you have residency and you're allowed to be here. But if you're, convicted of murder, serious sexual offenses, treason, terrorism, I keep going down the list. Or if you stole my bike, I'm still looking for the person who stole my bike. I was about 10 years old. It was a silver BMX my dad put together. I'm still upset about it.
Were you in Liverpool at the time?
I was not, sadly,
right,
so
then.
it wasn't you.
It wasn't us.
But it was in Guildford, Connecticut. If you know anyone, please get in touch. But if you do any of those offenses, from the very minor to the more serious, there is no check about someone's residency to be in the country, let alone any serious check about what nationality people really are. So not only do they just say, hey, Graham, where are you from? Oh, I don't know, I'm from here. Okay. Or if you said you were from Jamaica, all right, that's our record of someone's a Jamaican national. Thank you for reporting this to us. There isn't any check to see people are allowed to be here. Actually, for serious criminals that are in prison.
Is this another case of the Conservatives liking to people to think
that seems
that
an
they're
anomaly
tough when they're not really, and there's lots of...
Why are they kicking off about getting a driver's license more so than murderers? If you're really worried about who can be here and who can't, according to their passport.
Do you think they know, though?
Status. I mean, that seems to me, again, I'm not for moving to the right. That just seems like a gap.
Do you think they know? I mean, you look at Priti Patel and you think there's not much behind those eyes. I mean, did you see the interview with her last week where she kept on talking about counter-terrorism?
Yeah, we have to stop counter-terrorism.
Instead of terrorism, she kept saying counter-terrorism. She said it about 7 times in the one interview. It was like...
Well, I have to say, I am someone who also gets... I mean, I take the point that, I do think, there is something symbolically good, if nothing else, about having... we'll call them underrepresented groups, having people who reach high levels of cabinet. I think is generally a good thing. However, I do think there's a very big difference between someone who actually was an immigrant and actually experienced what it's like to cross the border, had to actually pass the citizenship test, had to actually prove I knew what the so-called British values were and all the rest of it that the government tells us we have, versus someone who didn't have to go through any of that stuff, whose parents or grandparents might have gone through that, and therefore, don't talk to me about immigration issues. No, we can, because you don't know the rules, and they certainly didn't apply to you. Well, I think we can be critical of her nonetheless.
In the case of Priti Patel, though, idiots are not underrepresented in our government. Just saying.
There is, well, I think if one was to underscore that point,
yes,
we have a government that has been committed, as you know, and I know you'll want to get to other topics, but just to say one more point at least on immigration, a government that's been committed since the referendum campaign, as painful as that is, to starting a points-based immigration system modeled on Australia, and a point I've mentioned on more than one of these highly pleasurable to view and to listen again podcasts. We have had one since 2008, and again, I think Tony Blair's government, I suppose if you really want one of these things, Tony Blair is the one you thank for doing it. But more remarkable, since our last meeting, the government asked the Migration Advisory Committee, its independent group, that gives independent advice, though they're only labor economists who only look at one aspect of migration, basically how much money we can squeeze, with the economic value of migrants to the exclusion of any non-economic impacts. Anyway, asked them, the MAC, about how they might start a points-based immigration and how this might look. And God bless Alan Manning. I'm getting religious now on the podcast this morning. It's that kind of day. The chair of the Migration Advisory Committee reminded Her Majesty's government that there already is one, and that the ideas that the government had about what they might do on playing with the points was going to make the system even more unworkable, was going to add complexity, was certainly not going to reduce the numbers of anyone coming in and out through it. In fact, the most recent quarter net migration stats have that the folks of the points-based system is at an all-time high. It has never been higher than under the government of Boris Johnson. So to use this to reduce was just not going to work. It was going to have complexity, therefore mistakes in its application. And so what does the MAC recommend the government does on launching a points-based system. I mean, I couldn't believe it. It's in black and white. They should just keep the points-based system we've got. Now, if you're wondering, listen, Brooks, come on. I know you read the whole report, and it was long. What else did we find out? There must be something else. The government clearly wasn't happy to see this, and there must be clues in this. Well, in the letter that accompanied the publication of this report, which was delayed, the chair of the Migration Advisory Committee, Professor Manning, said that he has a 3-year term which he could ask to have renewed. And typically, this is renewed for these types of bodies. Again, to underscore the independence from government and that they are just experts just trying to give advice on things, as I think this group was doing in this case. Never as much to my satisfaction, but was doing to this case. Anyway, Professor Manning notes that his request to have his term extended was rejected on receipt of on this report. So he asked to have another 3-year term. The government says, "What? We already have a system, and it's better than what we said objectively than to voters, right? You're not going to be the independent chair of our Migration Advisory Committee anymore, mate."
Okay.
They've allowed him an extra 2 months to, and I quote, paraphrase, to answer any questions relating to his report that they're about to bin, as they try to appoint someone else.
Who will say exactly the same thing, I suppose? Or say,
the independent
you know
advice
what?
was not the partisan political comment that they were hoping for.
I think that's happened before in politics, though.
The denial of all reality. It certainly has happened before, but when you've had years of people saying we need a points-based system, there is one, and it's better than any of the crap you've been coming up with. All right, sacked.
Wow.
Extraordinary. So I had a number of journalists got in touch with me saying, can they sack a chair of an independent body like this for this reason? I said, well, they didn't technically sack, they just didn't do the automatic renewal they ought to be doing.
Yeah.
Very naughty. Sounds like a government with its head in its hands and doesn't know what the hell it's doing.
I mean,
not for the first time on immigration. And then Priti Patel, one of the great many who does not seem to yet know that there is a points-based system. The Prime Minister doesn't even know this?
There's a lot of things that Priti Patel doesn't know. But also in terms of immigration, we've seen recently the government backheeling any attempts to, having the reunification of children, refugee children, who are incredibly vulnerable. And having them being reunited with their family who live in the UK, UK citizens naturalised in the UK. That is disgraceful. And more recently, there was a report about a guy...
Especially we're not talking many people.
There was a report about a guy who was born in Serbia, I think, who had a British passport. And he went over to Belgium, and he went to the embassy for whatever reason, and they took his passport off him. And now he's stateless, which I think is illegal, isn't it?
All those countries, you can't do that.
And then we've got the situation with the girl who went over to fight
Shamima Begum.
Fight with ISIS. Who's again had her passport taken off her, I assume, and now she's stateless as well. She's a refugee.
And so she lost her case. If I can talk to Begum case.
She was born in the UK.
She certainly was, and a British citizen.
We're sending Jamaicans back to Jamaica who have committed crimes because we don't want to deal with Jamaican people's crimes. And we're leaving a British person in another country because she committed crimes in another country.
She was also, I mean, one parallel. I've got, on the one hand, no sympathy at all with folks who are very, supportive of terrible terrorist organizations, all the rest of it. That's sad. There are some that have raised worries about underage girls being groomed by older men in gangs.
She was 15.
To be part of really bad things, whether it be at home or abroad.
This doesn't have to be Islamic terrorism.
It can be anything.
The Jonestown cult.
It can be lots of things. It can be lots of things. And so she was underage. And went abroad. Now, is alarming to me
Yeah.
about the case is, people may not like her, people might not like what
I
she did.
completely understand that. Yeah.
And I understand that equally, lots of things not to like about what was happening in the background. However, there was already a Supreme Court case about somebody that the Home Office stripped of his British citizenship when he was abroad, on the grounds that if he were to apply for nationality at another country, that the Home Office was convinced that that other country, a third country, would grant citizenship automatically to the person, and so that the person wouldn't really be stateless, because if they wanted to be part of a state, there was one waiting and willing and would automatically do that thing. The Supreme Court ruled that was, what was a technical legal term? Well, basically rubbish, on the grounds that it was not for
technical legal term.
Technical legal term. It was not for the British Home Office to decide the non-British nationalities of people who were not confirmed by those other countries. It wasn't for us to say who really was not, who was French or who was Polish, just as it's not for Syria or Iraq or other places to say who really is a British citizen that we then must let in according to a foreign government as one of our own, because they don't want them and they have stripped them of perhaps the citizenship there. I thought a fair enough point made. Anyway, this is the case law. So when it went to court, it was ruled that the Home Office had assurances, had assured itself, but not from Bangladesh, but assured itself that under Bangladesh law, the person was entitled to this, and that given that the judiciary in Bangladesh was committed in the view of the British Home Office to rule of law, the British Home Office thought the judiciary in Bangladesh would have to agree that she was entitled and would receive Bangladeshi citizenship, notwithstanding the material fact that the Bangladeshi government has denied that she is, at least currently on the books, a Bangladeshi citizen. So she is not participating in Bangladeshi democracy. She does not have a Bangladeshi address. They do not recognize her as one of their own. But the British government does. The British government sees her as being part of that. And so the court ruled that they accepted that Home Office story. That the Home Office, they said, was right in their view that a foreign government ought to be seeing her as one of their own, and that their court ought to uphold that, even if the Bangladesh government didn't do the right thing because of a commitment to the rule of law, and so was therefore okay. But I think I just thought just boldly is against fairly recent decisions of the Supreme Court. It was discussed in my book, Becoming British, not that long ago, and there's been no material reason on law to overturn it. So in the Begum case, I've said before, I've said it again. I was last speaking about this on a Radio 4 program with Lord Carlisle, not of the same political party, but he also said he thought that I was right, that under British law, and given what the Supreme Court of this country has said, that lots of things not to like about her. He was also the independent reviewer of all things relating to terrorism, not counter-terrorism.
Not counter-terrorism.
Distinction that this podcast is very
good.
Yes.
Jack Bauer.
We want more of that.
Counter-terrorism unit.
But we don't want more terrorism. But he thought that was
Stop
absolutely.
that, Jack.
But he thought absolutely right. Lord Carlisle, also practicing barrister.
And he's a Tory.
He's a Liberal Democrat.
Oh, he's a Lib Dem.
A Liberal Democrat that the Tories had as their.
What? Someone from Labour and someone from the Liberal Democrats agreeing about things.
It happens. And not for the first time, Graham.
Not for the first time, I know.
Yes, that's right.
I'm just saying.
Yes.
But this is the way that this has been going on now since the Tories got in 2010. The hostile environment, this idea that this obsession, it's absolute, they can't see anything else except where did you pop out your mum? That's the most important thing, that unless that happened to be in the UK and we don't want you. and then we'll change the rules, we'll bend the rules to make sure that and it's just so hypocritical. And I think a lot of people who voted for Brexit still want Brexit, they'll still think Brexit's a good idea, despite the fact that now the Conservative, the Tory graph, is now actually printing stories that we were talking about 2-3 years ago, saying you're going to need pet passports, you're going to need a visa, we're going to have checks on the borders, it's going to make food and drink prices go up, it's going to affect trade. And the one question that no Brexiteer will ever answer is how does putting barriers up to trade improve trade?
Yes. And they magically, when everything else was going so swimmingly well recently, they also have Sinn Féin topping the poll, the Republic of Ireland.
That's interesting. But when it comes down to immigration, I mean, that was the driving force behind Brexit.
Absolutely.
And behind a lot of government policy. Even before Brexit, we had the go home vans. And the hostile environment make people from other countries feel unwelcome in this country, which is absolute madness, because I keep trying to explain to people, and they get very upset because they think I'm being ageist. There's a big glut. There's a big glut of people called the baby boomers, and they're all retiring now, and they're getting ill. They're old. They're retiring. They're going to be in nursing homes. Someone's going to have to look after them, and they've got the wealth of the country is centered in them. There are baby boomers who have more disposable income on average than people in their 30s.
Sure, absolutely. Wow. That's right.
Which is, they haven't worked for 20 years, and they're going off on expensive flights to Australia and cruises, and you're like, how can you afford these things? But they had gold-plated pensions, private pensions, they had state pensions, and it's all seemed to work in their favour. They bought their house in 1963 for £5,000, and now it's worth 300,000. Ha! Well done, me. And that's not going to happen again.
No, highly unlikely.
But we need people coming from other countries who are skilled, trained. We've not had to pay for their education. How about that?
Sure.
And if you look at a bar chart of the net benefit to a country of immigrants, especially EU immigrants, it's a positive figure because we don't have to pay for their education.
Sure.
They come fully formed, 20 years old.
Sure. No, all these things are right. But one thing that strikes me is, again, I'm not for moving to the right on immigration stuff. However, how many people, according to official government records, actually did get identified and sent home from the go-home vans? I have the number, ladies and gentlemen, for your own infotainment. It's none.
Oh, wow.
How many new people who've been living in the country unlawfully have been identified thanks to the bank checks where you have to show your residency? Answer, ladies and gentlemen, none. And this is interesting. So while people did ring the go home number, none were apparently followed up, certainly to anyone being deported. And I do know people who rang the number saying, deport me, just kind of threatening, come on, Home Office, you're so bad and nasty, come knock on my door. And we're told to get off the line and leave them alone. So no one. What's interesting about the bank records, the private landlord, the driver license showing your residency thing, these were seen as ways of smoking people out, of identifying folks, so we get a handle on who was here unlawfully to deport. No one has been deported through these checks. No one new has been found out through these checks. Why? Because the banks were to kind of find out the names and nationalities, and these are checked against a list that the Home Office has already of who they think might be here unlawfully, and this is just to confirm they're still here. But no one has had a knock on the door, a letter in the post, put on an airplane. Nothing has come from these things. And then my favorite part of the hostile environment, one that is not talked about enough, is the I don't love you letter, as I call it. So this is if two people are in a relationship, say relating to a spousal visa or some other means of someone being allowed to stay in the country who's not otherwise allowed to be here on residency. The Home Office has a letter. It's a Word document. You can find it. It's still there, last I checked. You download it and you say, I, Thom Brooks, am no longer subsisting, that's the language, it's not very romantic. It's Valentine's Day tomorrow. I'm no longer subsisting with Angelina Jolie or whoever it is you say you're with. And you agree that the Home Office can use this form for whatever purposes they want to use it for. And the form, this disclosure, is supposed to help the Home Office identify people on fraudulent spousal visas or other types of things. Now, I have had the Labour front bench inquire for, I found out about this 2016, thereabouts, at least 3 years we've been inquiring about this. When I went to the Independent, a newspaper, about this, no one had noticed this form. It was one of those rare dog whistle politics. There was so much kind of junk that the Tories were doing to show that they were mean and nasty on immigration. They never got around to the press release, letting people know this is happening. But anyway, we've been pushing for how many forms have been received, what's been done with this data, how many people have actually been deported through something like this. And do you want to know the official data?
Is it 0?
Yeah, well, actually, they haven't been keeping records.
Brilliant!
Yeah,
This is the new Tory policy.
Yeah.
You're not getting your targets. You're not hitting your targets. Get rid of the targets.
Exactly. So to kind of tie a few strands of the discussion so far. So you have these go-home vans that led to no one going home. You have a hostile environment to identify new people that has actually not identified anyone new. You have a series of kind of mean policies that have not actually sent anyone anywhere. And the only thing that has actually led to anyone being deported is self-reporting of being a foreign national without any substantial checks to see who actually is. For those at home thinking, well, who's for foreign offenders being here, convicted of very serious stuff, I think they should go, and therefore there might be someone watching who thinks that that's all right. Well, I think even they shouldn't be happy about this because, we don't actually know how many foreign offenders are actually in prison because the government doesn't actually really check.
Well, this is another
now,
thing.
If you're worried about that, phone your local Tory member of Parliament.
We don't know how many people are coming in and out the country.
Yeah, you have this stuff for headline news.
That's because of the EU, and it's like, no, it's not. It's because people come in and out the country, and there's no.
Oh, Jamaica's got nothing to do with the European Union. This has got zero to do with the European Union.
ISIS, Syria, Bangladesh.
Nothing to do with the European Union. I mean, that's not.
A lot to do with the Commonwealth that we've been neglecting them.
Well, I think the Commonwealth is a glorious thing, and it might be Britain's only hope, but not a good one either.
It's not.
There's been a lot of problems with the Commonwealth for Britain. I think the Commonwealth will not want to come to Britain's rescue. They'll want to be equal to Britain. They will not want to be seen as subservient or doing Britain a favor without something in return.
But this is the thing about the Commonwealth. If we were doing right by the Commonwealth, we would stay in the EU because we were the foremost voice of the Commonwealth in the European Union. Obviously, you got Malta and Cyprus as well. But this is the thing: there's 53 countries in the Commonwealth. Take Britain out. Take India out, which has a comparable economy to Britain, actually, but obviously a lot more people. So a lot less spending power per person. And then you've got basically Australia, Canada. They're quite substantial economies, but quite small populations. The population of Canada is 40 million. The population of Australia is 25, 26 million. And then it's literally everybody else, all those other countries, and there's like 48 or 49 of them, put the GDP together, and it's less than the GDP of France on its own, just France. And I keep making this point of like, the rest of the world, we're going to trade with the rest of the world. And it just makes my head explode.
Well, what's going to happen?
I hear a politician saying it on the TV, and I find myself, and I'm sure people watching these podcasts won't feel alone that they do this as well. I find myself shouting at the TV. How are you getting away with saying these things? And giving people false hope that it's going to be fine because we're going to trade with the rest of the world. I'm like, what are we going to make? What are we going to sell them? How are we going to get it there? Logistics, like fuel, just like opening new markets. I watched a show just a few years ago. It was one of the guys from Dragon's Den.
Oh yeah,
I think it was Theo.
I can't pronounce the last name. I can't spell my name.
And he went over to India to try and break Marmite into the market in India, and everyone hated it. And it was so difficult. And that was a big British company, like Marmite, you know.
Huge, iconic.
And they had trouble breaking into a developing market. And
a friendly one.
There is just this sort of, as we were talking about then, you know, there seems to be this huge rift between this fantasy that politicians are peddling about immigration, about the EU, about whatever, and then reality. And since we last spoke, we have now left the European Union. Technically, although we still have to follow the European Union rules for the next 11 months at least. But it's now hitting cold, hard reality.
Sure.
And you're seeing the EU saying, well, you know, this is what we can do to you.
Sure. I want to let viewers in on a little secret, because I like kind of making kind of key announcements.
Yes.
When I'm here. And so there's this thought that, you know, it'll be all done in by the end of the year.
Yeah.
And by the 1st of January, we're out of everything. Deal or no deal, all this other stuff like this.
Yeah.
Now, while I'm about to drop a bit of a bombshell, freedom of movement isn't going to end on the 1st of January. I'll bet my house.
Hang on. You said that Brexit wouldn't happen.
Well, I don't think it really has. I don't think it really has. And we can easily reverse it.
I think there's a good chance of it ending up with Brexit in name only, and the Tories just peddling it like, you know.
That's what I told the Daily Mail.
Right, you're
In August of 2016, a couple months after this, I said that Brexit was not going to happen, and that anything that might happen would only be cosmetic and would be in name only.
So tell me about freedom of movement, because
the reason why I'm willing to make this bet,
okay, go,
is because it's already been extended. Oh, I've just dropped it.
What?
Oh my God.
What?
It's going to happen through June next year.
Oh,
I can tell you why.
Go on.
Well, it hasn't been officially announced, but I suspect that the reason is Erasmus programs. So students are allowed to participate, university students can go abroad to study in France and Germany, Italy, and all the rest of it next academic year without any change to the existing arrangement. And so how can they just hop on a plane and go to Italy, go to Poland, go wherever they want in the EU if we really are out? Well, we can't. So Erasmus has been, freedom of movement has been extended.
Couldn't they make an exception for students?
They haven't. Freedom of movement has been extended.
Okay. Until June.
To at least June.
To at least June.
To at least June. So the thought is that there will be no ifs, ands, ifs, or buts. Nothing will change. It'll definitely be, 1st of January, all the rest of it. Well, it's already been extended on one of maybe the biggest of the things that the government said they were not going to do.
Yeah, because freedom of movement's what basically, going back to immigration, it's what Brexit was all about.
Yeah,
and people don't seem to understand that it's going to affect us more than it's going to affect anybody else.
And people were really excited about, a lot of the Telegraph and others reported how for 1st of January, don't be looking for those unskilled laborers from the EU because they won't be able to come here. Yeah. And I wrote to all of them and said, no, freedom of movement actually is continuing, and it's on the Home Office webpage. It will continue. The other thing, for those who care about immigration rules, and I think I still am the only one, that the existing points-based system has has 5 tiers, but the 3rd tier was never used. So one of them is for basically rich entrepreneurs, investors, more or less. The second is for people who wear a tie who look like me. That's the one I came in on. And the others are about sports, entertainment, and students. And the third, for the points-based immigration system we have, was it's the tier 3 visa on the points system is for unskilled laborers from outside the EU. Now, that was a points-based system that was written up, but never put into practice. So there is a points-based system even for unskilled non-EU or EU citizens. If the government wants it, we have that too. But so even that's been covered already by Charles Clark, I believe, gets some credit for those who care. Former Home Secretary, I think at that time. I think he is the one who gets the credit for the
But we
points
need
system.
unskilled labourers.
No, I didn't say we didn't. But I'm
No,
saying
but
that's
this is the madness of all this.
Even
We've
that's already
got
done.
This older generation.
Labour's already done it.
It's a glut of people. There's more
Yeah.
of them. They've got more voting power because
Sure.
there's more of them. Because the wealth is so concentrated in that particular cohort. It's kind of a bit silly.
Yeah.
And lots of people, millennials, are
Sure.
putting their lives on hold. They can't get on the housing
Yeah.
ladder because all the wealth is being held by the older generation.
Yeah.
Now, the government is gung-ho for taking that wealth from those people if they get ill with certain types of illnesses, specifically dementia. If you go into a care home, you could end up losing your house. Your
terrible.
entire worth of your house will be drained away in the last few years of your life. You won't even know it because you'll have dementia. And this is the model that the governments are following at the moment. And as things get more difficult for the economy, we're just seeing the last quarter, no growth. No growth at all. And it's weird in this whole sort of idea of Brexit, this idea that we're going to have these super fast growth countries like Bhutan and Niger.
The land of the sleeping dragon. Yes, that's right.
They've got a dragon on the flag, like
They do.
Wales.
It's fascinating.
Yeah,
yes.
anywhere that has a dragon on the flag. It's a thumbs up.
Bhutan is a fascinating place.
But,
One day I'll tell you the story of a guy I know who had a yak burger and had a terrible experience. But anyway, another time.
These places with tremendous growth rates, but they're starting from a very low base.
Yeah, sure.
So a growth rate of 7% isn't that great if your GDP is only half as much as an FT 100 company.
Yes, no, I think that's right, and I think one of the things that has to happen, crudely, is that politicians need to become afraid of voters, not in the street, not in the letterbox, but they need to be afraid of them at the ballot box, that are younger than why is it that folks who are retirees or those who own their home or getting closer to doing that, the property owners, why is so much, as it were, at least at first glance, geared towards them, to their interests and all the rest of it? Partly, I think it is because that this crowd has more of a stake in things. So if you don't have much of a pension, you're less vested in what happens to the pension pot. If you've got a gold-plated pension, you care enormously about this kind of thing. But the more important thing is that generation votes. They vote. And this is something, and it's not unique to Britain, so this is not a point just for here. In the United States, the association of the AARP, the American Association of Retired People, I think that's actually what the AARP is. It's one of the biggest, if not one of the biggest, pressure groups, lobbying organizations, folks who are of a certain age or older. You don't have to be retired to be a member of the AARP, I don't believe. And they mobilize in an incredible way. Now, they're not Republican, they're not Democrat. They don't go. They don't do that. They're not the NRA. They're not really kind of aligned to one side or the other. But they put issues on the agenda. They mobilize their voting base in a way that Rock the Vote from MTV didn't quite do, as cool as it was to see Dave Mustaine from Megadeth telling me to get involved, man.
If you've got people,
which I did,
the cohort say of the people who are 20 to 30 right now, they are either finishing the higher education, further education. They are working, starting their job, trying to find somewhere to live, falling in love, getting
all the rest of it.
Trying to build a family.
Some even falling out and filling in the form I told you about.
So if you look at the actual cohort, you go, right, okay, well, there's less of them than there is people between the age of 60 and 70, for instance. There's just less of them. overall. And then of those people, there's the people who care about politics, which is always going to be less than 100.
Sure.
Always.
Unfortunately.
And then out of
for us.
that, the people who care about, you've got the people who've got time to do anything about it.
Yeah.
And then out of that, you've got the people who have the time and the money to do anything
Yes.
about it. And you're getting that cohort smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes.
And this is why I don't appreciate it when people say, oh, the young need to vote more. It's like, no, we need to find a way to get the older people to vote more altruistically, because they have more people who are interested in politics. They have more people, full stop. They have more wealth as a cohort. I'm not saying that everyone who's over the age of 60 is wealthy, but I'm saying they've got that and
more time. Yeah.
That is the big one. Because
Yeah.
if you are working 9 to 5, you've got young children, you're a primary caregiver, you just do not have time to dedicate to politics. You
No,
just don't have
I
it.
think it's right. I mean, one kind of massive difference in time that is remarkable to me, working here at the august presence that is Durham University, is that when I was a nerd as an undergraduate, and I like to think, I did all right. I got 2 degrees, I got accepted to other universities, so I was not an academic failure. People have different views on maybe my other thoughts, but academically on paper I did okay.
I love the idea that you're sitting there with a Megadeth T-shirt on under your
Well,
suit.
actually, I was a Slayer. I was even more of a Slayer fan.
Brilliant.
Yes.
I've got my Mannix T-shirt on.
Oh, Max is great.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Show it off. Go on.
This is, there you go, Mannix Free Preachers.
Oh, this is perfect.
This is from
It's great. Yeah, no, I saw them.
1995, 6.
I saw them rock Sedgefield at Hard Rock Live.
Need to get new clothes.
No, hardly. But maybe.
My birthday's coming up, friends.
Oh yeah, so there you are.
Send clothes.
Chip in.
Send me
maybe
t-shirts.
for next time I'll wear a Kiss or a Slayer shirt for the program to show that I still have it.
Come dressed in Kiss makeup.
Well, don't tempt me, Grammy. This is gonna. I can already see the comments now.
Just don't mention
Gene
it.
Simmons, right?
Don't mention
Gene
it.
Simmons or Paul Stanley. I want viewers to tell us.
Don't mention it. We just do the whole podcast and you're talking normally.
Hey, I'll just talk about Detroit
Only
Rock
people
City.
watching the video will get the joke. Anyway, go on.
Eventually, but a very important moment in my life. But all great stuff. Rock and roll, rock the vote.
Yeah.
But one thing that's very different is that when I was a nerd, a geek, as an undergraduate, spending, I thought, certainly for my time, a lot of time on my studies, it was enough in applying to university to just, not get into too much trouble in high school, have good grades, and I could get in somewhere. I didn't have to kind of do anything else. And then in terms of my studies, I was in student government. I started the political science, basically society, and was involved in some things at the end of my time as undergraduate. But most of my time as a student was playing in a variety of we'll call them experimental bands of various genres and all in none genres. We were constantly trying to create genre, transcend it even.
Transcend it. New wave.
Exactly, and that was fine, and it was enough to then get on to graduate school and one day become a law professor and dean. But now talking about the time that people don't have who are young, it's not enough to get terrific A levels. You now, for admission to a place, dare I say it, like here, you need to also have done great on your GCSEs. We look at GCSEs as well as A level.
I wouldn't have got in here then.
Well,
I didn't, but
well, yeah. Of course, I'm sure we have looked at other contextual factors very favorably. But I've been struck by the standout profile for folks getting into, say, top law schools in particular now in the UK. They've done not only great on their A level, meeting A-star AA roughly or equivalent. They've also done terrific on the GCSEs. Typically, probably had a B or not much of Bs. Also would have had spent time in shadowing lawyers. I had no shadowing of anybody when I was in high school. I was just trying not to get into too much trouble. But now they have to kind of be doing work experience or shadowing people for the career they want to have after they do a degree, while getting amazing A-level results that I certainly didn't have. Extraordinary. And then while they're here doing their degree, I would say probably on average, not to get anyone overly stressed out. But typically, people have done, it would seem, at least 3 work placements, and the folks who are getting the interviews at the top places are telling me absolutely insane stuff that they had. Oh yeah, I got my interview for this big firm in the city, and so I've done 5 or 6 work experiences, usually including the bar, just to say that they have tasted life as a barrister and rejected it, that they have done commercial experience, but also family law or crime, to show they've done things that often can rope people in as from the heart, but have decided to turn their back. Like, where do you find time to do all that and get a first?
I feel like your indignation about this is a little, because I'm an arts graduate. I did history and politics.
Music. Yeah.
But my partner, who came here to Durham, has a PhD in physics. And I think that she would have a few things to say about how much work she had to do doing a science course, compared with the amount of work you have to do doing an arts course. And when we were chatting about it, I was like, I had Wednesdays off. I just had no lectures on a Wednesday.
Yes. Yeah, sure. No, that's right.
I hate you.
Yeah.
I was working 9 to 5 every single day because I was doing a science degree. And yet here we are now, where we're in a situation where, I get what you're saying about people having less time to get involved in politics, for instance. Yeah. But scientists are being ridiculed and ignored by people like myself who did arts degrees. Who left university with, a BA in classics or something like that, and they go on TV and they say this person who has studied incredibly hard, they have a PhD, they're a member of the Royal Society, they've got a Nobel Prize, and yet they're just making this stuff up about climate change to concern us unnecessarily.
To be on the other side.
When the options are this: either if we're wrong about climate change, then we've basically made a cleaner, more, world for no reason, energy self-sufficiency, more pure air for our children to breathe.
We're living longer, it's terrible.
For no reason.
Yeah, that's right.
If they're wrong, everybody dies.
Yeah.
Everybody dies. It's an existential crisis.
Sure.
And people are like, that'll be all right. What's your qualifications for saying this? I got a degree in philosophy.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I did my PhD in philosophy. But you're right. You do have this kind of difference.
But you defer to scientists when it comes to science.
Well, you would think that that's what one ought to do.
That's what my point is.
And I think it's an excellent point. It's this view that there should be balance that's been perpetuated in the United States, where balance means not showing different sides of a view, which might, on the climate change side, have 2 people who accept that it's happening, accept that it's primarily human caused, accept that there's a tight time scale to do stuff, but then maybe one is maybe more positive about adaptation technologies than the other person. For a rough example as to what balance could look like, should we
no, we've still got people.
Be more conservationist, or should we be more adaptation?
There are people who don't believe it's happening.
But the balance that
on the telly,
it's a political balance you want at all times between a left and a right. Well, that is something I think that's been badly brought in from the United States, where there's really only 2 viable parties, and so anything that might have any public policy or political nature is kind of channeled through these 2, so that what about gun ownership? Well, most Americans have lots of doubts about how that is working right now, and would actually favor restrictions, although that balance is not reflected if you have a Democrat and a Republican trying to show different sides of that. So I think, so what it means to have a balanced view, I think you're right, should be a balance amongst those who have some authority of their subject, and to have authority in the subject doesn't mean that everyone is lockstep marching in the same way. Plato is right in philosophy, Aristotle wrong.
You're right about the left-right sort of thing. It doesn't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
In the last general election, in December, you had a party that just lived in an absolute fantasy land versus a party that lived in an absolute fantasy land versus another party, a smaller party, who lived in an absolute fantasy land. And I was looking at all three of them going,
what's happening?
Where's reality? Where is reality here?
Yeah.
You had Joe Swinson saying, I'm going to be Prime Minister. And you're like, no, you're not.
Yes.
You
might not win your seat.
Yeah, Jeremy Corbyn, Labour, thinking, we don't need to worry about Durham. Why would we need to worry about Durham? We're going to go after the Tories in the Cotswolds. And you're like, no, defend your seats. Things have changed.
Yes.
And then the Tories go, and Brexit's going to be great. Got to get it done. Yep, it's going to be so. And you're all living in fantasy world. And I was going to say, don't worry, kids, if you haven't got very good A-level or GCSE results, because you could still get a job in government or in the opposition.
Yes.
So long as you went to private school.
Well, the leader of the opposition might soon be someone from a very different background.
Yes, it might be someone who actually pulled himself up by his bootstraps.
So, okay, well, we've meandered across a few topics there. We're going to have to wrap up because we're past the 1 hour mark.
Yes.
But yeah,
Last point.
In a nutshell about immigration,
Yeah.
hostile environments. I mean, obviously this is the way things have been going for a long time now with the government, and
Indeed.
with this 80-seat majority, I see no reason for it to stop. Next time, I would really like to talk about both the Labour leadership contest, which has taken some very strange twists and turns,
It certainly has.
and perhaps more importantly, really, the Democrats' nominations in America, which appear to be all over the shop as well.
Hopefully we'll have some more clarity on that for the next one. Right now, I think we're just looking at a crystal ball and just guessing. Sanders seems to have. We won New Hampshire. I don't know if Iowa's been confirmed yet, but it seems it was probably him as well.
Iowa was Buttigieg.
Was it?
Yeah,
right.
by like 1-2 votes or something.
So Sanders has done very well. Mayor Pete is doing very well, as they call him back home. I've been surprised to a degree. I will come out with this.
Yeah.
I would have thought it wasn't Biden's to lose. But given that Sanders, I think, did have a bit of a health scare or a wobble in the last 12 months, I thought that's usually bad news for people. So Trump's telling the doctor, you will say I'm the fittest president ever and sign this, and not wanting to release records and so on. This is all kind of part of a carefully orchestrated narrative that the president, if there's worries about the president's health, this has traditionally been covered up, whether it be FDR, when his health started to decline, Ronald Reagan's health when his was declining, that was covered for public view. This is something that because of fears that people go off you, and I thought that would have caused Bernie some problems in addition to potentially age. That youth seems to be something that has been attracting votes, and Mayor Pete is maybe capitalizing on bits of this. But I thought that Biden, with the name recognition, with the money machine, that he is a very effective money generator even now, and a tough talking, brass knuckle fighting lawyer who knows Washington as well as anyone, thought was maybe a good corrective to Trump, at least on television. That thought that he would probably do all right, and of course had been the front runner. He's not done well at all, and he's not the front runner anymore. And I found that a fascinating twist and a turn.
Well, let's talk about this next, because we've had a go at the right a lot in this episode. Let's have a go on the left.
We will.
Because there's a good question that's asked. I've forgotten the name of the show, but it was Aaron Sorkin's next show after he did The West Wing.
Oh yeah.
It was called it wasn't called Broadcast News, but it was something like that, and it had Jeff Daniels as the main character in it. In the first episode, he's answering questions. He's a TV exec, works on Broadcast News. And someone says to him, about the patriarchy or something, and he responds with a huge go about the way things are set up. And he says, I've got a question for you. the people on the left, they think they're really smart.
Yeah.
But if you're so smart, how come you lose all the time? That's a very good question, which we shall address next time.
We certainly will.
But thank you very much for
A
coming to
pleasure
speak to
as
me.
always. Great
And,
stuff.
until next time, here's to the EU.
Yes, yes.